Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. We would love to know where you're joining us from. So drop in the chat where you are logging in from. That's a little redundant, but you know what I mean. And then we'd also love to know, are you a Nana or Mimi or Gigi or grandma like me, or are you an expectant mom, a practitioner? Just curious to know who's joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. We are going to get started because I know we have a lot we want to cover, and some of you have already indicated that you're joining us on your lunchtime. So I don't want you to run out of time to enjoy this amazing conversation. I am going to fangirl for a moment. I was just sharing with Dr. Scott that I've followed her work for a minute. So welcome everyone to our virtual sacred space. Hopefully we'll have a full house. We had quite a few people register, so I'll talk fast, but not too fast, so you get a chance to log in and get the benefit of the full benefit of Dr. Scott's brilliance. While you settle in, as I mentioned, drop your name, where you're joining us from, and then if you're a birth worker, a parent, a Nana, a Gigi, funny story. My daughter's husband is Chinese, and I'd always said I was going to be a Gigi. And the first time I said that I wanted to be Gigi, his face looked a little odd. Gigi has a unique meaning in either Mandarin or Cantonese, and it's not an appropriate name for grandma.
Oh,
So
oh.
I have to be Nana. But if you are Gigi, good for you. Before we dive into Dr. Scott's brilliance, I'd love for us to take a collective breath. We have had an amazing week, and last night we had an opportunity to spend some time with Shawnee Gibson, and I'm going to steal her one of her practice, and that is that we stop to take a collective breath to reclaim the sacred community that we're building here. We're going to exhale all the stress and the statistics and the data, the noise, and inhale the power of our community. So if you'll indulge me for this moment and take a deep breath and exhale, forget what you saw on social media and what everyone is saying about whatever everyone else is doing. And then we're just going to be in community and in this space and open the room for learning. Um, the power, as Shawnee explained it, is this collective energy, which is exactly why we founded Birthing the Magic. We realized that to support Black mamas and those who care for them, we had to move beyond the data, which is hard for many of us. My co-founder is a neonatologist, and I spent many years in corporate settings, so data means a lot to us. But we also realized we had to move beyond that data and start seeing the real lives and the
Mhm,
sacred legacies that are created in every birthing room,
mhm,
which is why it was so humbling and exciting for me to read Dr. Scott's book because she so beautifully articulates the heartbeat of our mission and the heartbeat, or which should be the heartbeat of everyone who's engaged in a birthing mama's experience. And she
mhm,
provides the evidence and the logic and the language we need to stop treating birth as a business, stop treating birth as merely statistics,
mhm,
and start respecting the human beings. So I'm excited for her to talk about her roadmap. I need to tell you, her bio, if you've not read it, is just amazing. She is a medical doctor. She has her master's in public health. She's a fellow of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. She's a chief Black feminist physician, scientist. She's CEO of Birthing Culture Rigor, and she is the developer of the first patient-centered or patient-reported measure of obstetric racism. She's a recovering, and I quote her, recovering dissident, OBGYN who is dismantling systems to center Black humanity. She's a warrior, a scholar,
Oh.
a truth teller. Please welcome my new friend and our guide today, Dr. Karen Scott. Dr. Scott, I'm just so excited to have you. And I know I probably have not covered your bio thoroughly. What have I missed?
I mean, thank you first and foremost for inviting me to be in this space. And I see folks in the chat that I'm familiar with who've also supported me. Hi, Leslie. Hi, Rose. Um, I mean, you haven't really missed anything. I appreciate the way you all have approached me and your language and your logic and your rationale for including me in the space, but also how you see my work, how you hold me in my work. And it's refreshing and rare for people to see me, hear me, and hold me the way I want to be held and seen. So that alignment means everything. And it goes back to what's core in my work and how I'm describing how Black mothers and birthing people deserve to be held is that psychological safety and connectedness. And so thank you. I'm glad that we are in kinship with each other.
No, thank you. I'm so humbled. I think you want to share a segment of your
I
book first.
I do. Um, Based on the questions, I know I'm gonna give myself a little timer. So based on the questions that Maria prepared, but also my desire to ensure that the people who engage my work understand, get an understanding, I should say, of kinship and why and how Black mothers have defined what kinship means to them, but also the ways in which hospitals violate that. And so my measure, the Sacred Birth Quality Framework and the Patient Report Experience measure of obstetric racism includes kinship as a way of evaluating hospitals' performance around quality, safety, and equity. And it is the only quality framework and validated perinatal measure of quality that includes kinship, chosen and given kinship. So I'm going to start with that, and hopefully I'm in the right place. Okay. Um, So, when asked about the quality of care after childbirth hospitalization during the first 24 to um, 72 hours postpartum, Black mothers shared a feeling of being abandoned and dismissed. Black mothers also shared additional testimonies of iatrogenic parent-child separation, which I've defined in my book as clinician-initiated or systems-initiated, coerced, or forced separation, distancing of the parent, the child, and the family. And it gets done a lot of times without even involvement of law enforcement. So that's what I also want to bring today is how hospitals violate kinship in ways that our family policing systems have done that, but the hospitals and clinicians and the clinical team can do that without law enforcement. So again, Black mothers shared additional testimonies of iatrogenic parent-child separation without parental notification or consent. When interrogating the NICU or the neonatal intensive care unit as the new chattel slavery, I am interrogating the institutionalized policies that define and shape physician and nursing practices and behaviors that endow physicians and nurses with unfettered authority to enter the room of a sleeping adult Black mother and Black father, remove the Black child, relocate the Black child to another room in another department unit, then proceed to initiate extraction of bodily fluids or injection of various substances via insertion of other various needles and IV lines without the expressed and the enthusiastic consent of one or both Black parents. When does consent to childbirth hospitalization automatically revoke parental rights to make decisions about the health, safety, and well-being of one's own child? These birth narratives of Black families navigating system or clinician facilitated parent child separation or delayed reunification without the involvement of family policing systems are violations of the right to parent existing children in safe and healthy, sustainable environments, free of the threat and or real acts of violence or retaliation from the government and other systems and structures of power. That is one of the tenets of reproductive justice. Kinship disruption as a consequence of reinforcing power inequities between the medical industrial complex and Black mothers, Black fathers, Black grandmothers, and Black families will never be sustainable or supported, and therefore remains a major violation of quality, safety, and human rights. Jasmine, a Black mother in Los Angeles, recalled the memory of birthing her second child, holding her child, and then awakening in the middle of the night to her baby missing from her postpartum room with her husband sleeping in the room with her and the baby girl. So with my son, that was great. With my daughter, though, I can remember having her, holding on to her, and then she was gone. And I was like, well, where's my baby? Like, what time is it? What's happening? Oh, well, she's downstairs in the nursery. She was 5'7", 5 pounds, 7 ounces. They said she needs to be downstairs because of your high blood pressure and because of the medicine that you're on. I was having the ear infection, so they gave me the medicine. So I kept going back and forth to sleep. I was like, but her dad is right here. Like, why does she have to be in another room? I don't know how long that was, but I felt like that was forever. I had my baby at 12:26 in the afternoon. I have a feeling like I really didn't have her until like 7 o'clock at night. Like on a full on, like I'm holding my baby. She's here with me. This is what's happening. And I don't even think I really had her until they moved me to the other room. So I didn't, that communication was off to me. Granted, I was in and out of sleep because I was so exhausted. But I'm like her father's right here. Like there's no reason for her to be in a whole nother room with other people when I'm here, when he's here. So, and then even when I got to that second room, they didn't really check on me as much. It was kind of just like, oh, you're here. Okay. Then when it was time for me to go, they were like, well, all right, it's time to go. Like, hurry up and get your stuff. Like, I felt rushed the second time around, and I just didn't like that. In this scenario, Jasmine awakened to find her newborn Black baby girl missing. Once again, the opening line of a Black mother's postpartum narrative starts off like a scene in a Hollywood movie adaptation of a kidnapping or a day in the life of an enslaved Black mother on a plantation. I can remember having her, holding onto her, and then she was gone. And I was like, well, where's my baby? Like, what time is it? What's happening? Jasmine included her baby girl's birth weight in her narrative as a cue to point to the listener or reader to interrogate the weight criteria for a newborn to be admitted to the NICU, 5.5 pounds or 5 pounds and 8 ounces. What about the Black baby girl's condition with a birth weight that was 1 ounce below weight criteria, warranted a NICU admission? Assuming the Black baby girl is a term infant birthed to a Black mother navigating preeclampsia, I wondered about the additional neonatal indications for the iatrogenic parent-child separation. As Jasmine explained in exquisite detail, the reasons provided by the hospital team focused exclusively on the Black mother's condition. If there was no other reason to take this Black baby girl from her Black mother and Black father, then one must interrogate the motivation, what feels like a forced Black parent-child separation, motivated to reinforce the clinician's self-worth, or hospital policies and to uphold hospital domination over the Black mother and the Black father and their Black baby, hence framing the NICU as the new chattel slavery. Forced Black parent-child separation and the motivations are the exact definition of Davis's dimension of obstetric racism, medical abuse. The overall quality of care also violates other patient community-driven quality domains such as safety and accountability, autonomy, communication and information exchange, kinship, and empathy and humanity, discussed in greater detail in Chapter 7. Likewise, forced parent-child separation reinforces anti-Black racism and anti-Black misogynistic notions that threaten the humanity and dignity of Black men and Black women. Uninterrogated acts of forced parent-child separation means hospital policies and practices, and the people making and enforcing such policies and practices support the portrayal of Black men and Black women as unfit and indecent human beings, incapable of raising their own family and parenting their own children in safe and healthy environments within their hospital postpartum rooms. Ultimately, iatrogenic parent-child separation violates reproductive justice. Again, one must interrogate the motivation of the obstetric and NICU teams to forcibly remove a Black newborn baby from the presence and protection of her two physically and emotionally available and capable Black parents. Based on a prior analysis, the annual cost of NICU admissions were estimated at 26.2 billion US dollars in the United States. Additionally, the average cost of a NICU admission per term infant was calculated in the range of about 2,500 to 2,900, with the average of the NICU stay being 2.2 days, compared to the cost of a NICU admission for a newborn baby with no complications at $800. Cost analyses by the Healthcare Cost Institute revealed that from 2017 to 2021, admission increased to higher levels. The number of newborns admitted to the NICU and the spending per NICU admission increased to higher levels. Additional study findings revealed that increases in per day spending contributed more to the escalating admission level spending than actual increases in the number of days in an average NICU admission. The authors also provided insights into the drivers of increased daily spending, such as changes in service provision from low to high, more complex, resource-intensive services, and/or increases in unit prices. The trends of NICU admission, durations, and spending raised concerns about the possible overuse or misuse of these services, especially in situations where the high level of care may not be medically necessary and sometimes incurring more medical risks than benefits. Likewise, the authors raised concerns for underutilization in situations where a NICU admission could be more valuable. In returning to the impacted families with a newborn in the NICU, the authors expressed concerns that active empathy and humanity, the sixth and seventh patient identified quality domains in the Sacred Birth Framework, discussed greater in detail in Chapter 7. The data suggested that the additional cost of a NICU admission in combination with potentially high out-of-pocket expenses for a recent childbirth hospitalization, possibly complicated by medical comorbidity requiring higher, more complex, resource-intensive staffing, services, and procedures, could leave families facing significantly higher than expected bills for both maternity and newborn care. So, turning our attention back to Jasmine's postpartum narrative, a forced iatrogenic parent-child separation for the purposes of a NICU admission of a term infant at 5 pounds 7 ounces with no other neonatal indications seemed very suspicious. An empty NICU bed makes no money. As briefly mentioned in Chapter 2, one must begin to interrogate NICU admissions as the new chattel slavery of Black newborn babies, with incubators and multiple IV lines serving as the new forms of incarceration and shackling of Black babies, funding a multi-billion-dollar industry. With increasing rates of maternal health, maternal death, and infant death, and preterm births that disproportionately and unfairly impact Black mothers and Black babies, combined with the martyrdoms giving the U.S. a D plus for the second, now third consecutive year, in the context of forced inductions, forced cesarean births, and disproportionate rates of severe maternal health complications among Black reproducing bodies in military hospitals, including the performance of cesarean births and adult ICU admissions compared to white producing bodies, the manufactured U.S. maternal health crisis is clearly profitable to powers that benefit from divestment, disruption, destabilization, dysregulation, and denial of Black kinship, liberation, and vitality. Again, examining the culture and practices of hospital-based obstetrics and neonatology outside of historical context, contemporary implications, and theoretical concepts such as empathy, humanity, health equity, obstetric racism, and reproductive justice leads to a very myopic, inaccurate, and imprecise evaluation of the root causes of the manufactured Black maternal and perinatal health crisis in the US. So, thank you.
Oh, wow. I loved when you shared that you were going to read this passage because I think it so beautifully illustrates the dynamic that,
Mhm.
for those who don't know, I spent many, many years working for a pharma company and tiptoed through a lot of hospitals. And what I think this truly highlights is how hospital policies, while they may have most well-intentioned and designed for safety or efficiency or whatever, that there's often a deep human cost, right? And when,
Yes.
particularly when those policies are not communicated
Mhm.
well or with empathy. And then the other thing I think I took from this
Mhm.
passage is that it's important to acknowledge that when, as Black birthing people, that when we walk into a birthing room or when we walk into a medical setting, we don't walk in with the same history as our peers, right?
Yes.
When we talk about being feeling unseen or dismissed,
Mhm.
that we have to recognize for many of us, it's through the lens of, for me, I'm from Southern Indiana, and for
Mhm.
those who are unfamiliar with Lyle's Station and the medical trials that they conducted on children there. Um,
Mhm.
I'll drop it in the chat when I get a chance. I grew up knowing those stories. So even though I have worked very closely with physicians, and I don't know anybody that gets up, puts on a white coat, and says, I want to, let anybody die today. I also know that for us, for my generation, we grew up knowing that there were children who suffered irreparable damage.
Mhm.
And we've all heard the Tuskegee Airmen story. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that just uh, it made me like, I'm glad I was off camera, because I could feel that mama and the terror
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
know. Thank you so much for those words. You speak up. So here's another question. You speak
Yes.
about birth as a sacred event, and you literally chose to name your book sacred, but that you say that it's been clinicalized. For the families with us who may not fully understand, how do we begin to reclaim our sacred space
Mhm.
when it may feel as if the hospital environment is so sterile or that there are policies? How do we claim that?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. So I'm gonna look at I would first like to I will give credit and praise and gratitude to Black women birthing justice and the book that they wrote that was edited by Chinyere Opara and Alicia Bonaparte. I read that book in 2016, 2017, and actually included it in my syllabus for an undergraduate upper level seminar. And reading that book in 2017, here's context. I completed medical school in 2002 and completed residency training in 2006. So 11 years later is the first time I'm introduced to an attitude, a radical attitude and practice and perspective on
Mm,
approaching birth as sacred. That is not how birth was introduced to me in the medical industrial complex, trained as an OBGYN in this country. Birth was something that needed to be managed, right? Because we had other things to do as an OBGYN. Births get in the way. That's how we were trained, right? We engage, and I am speaking as a retired OBGYN, but I'm saying things that probably have never been spoken aloud. But back in my day, we were trained that the way to build your practice was to be open to people who are pregnant. Because if you were able to get their trust while they're pregnant, support them through their births, then they would be there for you to do all your gynecological procedures. For you to ultimately, the womb, the uterus, you would eventually, I guess, pretend to care for it because ultimately you're going to remove it as a part of how you generate revenue. And so we already know that traditional Black grand and indigenous midwives have already been practicing sacred birth. That was already a part of their philosophy of care. It is in the medical industrial complex that we have totally undermined that, right? In our country, our country was birthed by midwives. Our country was fed literally by the milk of Black people. Just be honest, right? My grandmother was a wet nurse, so my great grandmother. So I'm saying that to say that it is not kind of a reclaiming or reclamation of the sanctity of birth. It is, I would say, stating that if we are forced or coerced to continue to birth in hospital settings, because we are, 98% of births continue to happen in the hospital despite an increasing number of people choosing community birth at home or in birthing centers led by midwives. The fastest group are Black women. But even with that, only up to 2%. So how do we reclaim birth as sacred in a system that was never designed to honor us? And it is going to require a dismantling of the ways in which those who get to be, those in the system who are deemed the authority figures of birth, we need to dismantle how they're being taught. We need to, like, how do we redesign an OBGYN? It is a redesigning of them, re-socialize them or de-socialize them, decolonize them to see, midwifery first models, to see community traditional practices as the first kind of approach, and that we are interventionalists. I'm a surgeon. I did not realize that, but if you go into the ACOG Museum in DC, the headquarters, the museum, it is full of sharp metal, very violent looking objects because we are trained as surgeons. We cut up bodies. I'm not saying everyone sees themselves that way, but that is a reality. So would we want a surgeon to be the first to encounter us in this very physiological, phenomenal, very powerful way that we continue our love and our legacies? I don't think so. And so I think we have to really think about how do we hold OBGYNs and insurance companies, but OBGYNs and health systems accountable for how we are cared for in the ways that we define what care means, which is what is the beauty of sacred birth, is that 36 Black mothers and birthing people were able to help me like reclaim the sanctity of birth as a quality metric. And that has not, I don't think, happened in that way. So that's one way, is that how do we change the way we define quality and then hold those who are authorized to facilitate birth in a hospital setting up to the definitions of what community asserts as quality, as safety, and we're not doing that.
Mm, powerful. Um, Before I forget, because I'm old and probably ADHD, it's interesting that you say that one of the books that influenced you is another book that I love, which is
Yeah.
Birthing Justice, rather.
Mhm.
Um, we actually today at 3 are talking to Dr. Alicia.
I know.
Thank you for that plug.
Yes,
So
yes.
someone had asked what was the name of the book that influenced you during residency, and I'm going to drop in the chat. It's called Birthing Justice, and we're talking to one of the co-editors at 3 Eastern. So I'm gonna. I had a
Yes.
thought.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have read Leslie's commentary about
I
Nikki's.
know.
That threw me
We
off.
can
It threw me off.
flow
I'm
with
not gonna read.
however I know. We can flow with however you want to go. I'm just
Oh,
just so excited we're in this
one of
space.
the things that you mentioned in just now that led what makes me think about this, and you covered it in your book as well. You challenge us to rethink who is the expert.
Yes.
So my
Yes.
question for you is Nana, right? Is how can a
Mhm.
birthing person or her Nana find their voice when we are in a system that can often seem overwhelming?
Yes, I'm so glad that you asked that question. And so I almost want to pull like read from it. But as a nana, that's exactly one of the many of the Black mothers from the book. Um, and let me take a step back. Okay. So what I learned the most from these 36 Black mothers and birthing people is again the way that they define what kinship means to them. and kinship in the sense of biological or given or chosen social kinship. And not only how they defined kinship, but how they saw the hospitals either affirming, activating, amplifying these kinship ties, or how they saw the hospital disrupting, degrading, destabilizing, almost trying to like this uh, disentangle, right, these bonds. Black mothers talked about kinship in terms of leveraging the power of kinship, the presence and power, protection of kinship in the hospital setting through their partners, their husbands, through their siblings, their sisters, but also through their mothers, of course, but also through their mothers in a sense of their mother's mother as well. So we think about like legacies where a pregnant person, the one time that the grandmother and mother and daughter, right, are together is literally when the grandmother's pregnant, right? Because the grandmother's pregnant with her daughter, and the daughter um is a grandmother who is pregnant, right, is pregnant with a female fetus, and then those eggs in the female fetus, we hold all those eggs as a female. I'm speaking biological female at 16 weeks of life. So one way that Nana or grandmothers and mothers can activate the power of kinship is exactly how Black mothers have described. There was a moment where a Black mother, again, is separated from her child after a cesarean birth. And the hospital policy was that the birthing person, had to ambulate or walk. Now, they've just had a cesarean birth. Walking immediately after a major abdominal surgery is not to be expected immediately, but the requirement for her to see her child to be reunified was that she had to walk. And so it was the grandmother, Nana,
Mhm.
who had to intervene and say, well, if she can't walk and you won't let her go into the NICU because she can't walk, then why do you not provide us with the means of like a wheelchair so I can, you know, be present with my daughter to see her daughter, my grandchild, but why does she have to be able to like stand and walk when I'm here? I'm the adult. I have not undergone surgery. I'm capable of walking. I may be more alert. Like I'm here, but yet you still deny the reunification of a parent and a child, a Black mother and their child after cesarean birth because the mother can't walk and you're afraid of her capacity um, to be alert right now. And it just, that again, it goes back to neutral apathy, right? The level of dehumanity, like the level of inhumanity and lack of compassion and lack of grace and consideration that a hospital staff would even think that they would want to uphold that policy and or not be creative and compassionate enough to say, well, you're Nana, you're here, at least that is the adult that's alert, that can walk, that can wheel the mother into the NICU. But that's outlined in the book. And that was the reason why she could not be reunified with her child because she had to demonstrate walking, even in the presence of Nana. And so these are just other examples of how it's egregious, it's violent, it's inhumane, the lack of compassion and dignity that our communities are offered because of a hospital policy that doesn't make a lot of sense if the hospital were to embrace kinship, right? I understand that a person who's undergone surgery within the first 12 or 24 hours, one may not want to leave a child with them. But if Nana is there, then why
Mhm.
are we still delaying, obstructing, refusing parent-child reunification in the presence of kinship?
Oh, that's unreal. I mean, I'm, I had to stop for a moment because I was
Yeah.
like, wait, I on television we see Mama wheeled in. um, but then I also go, okay, I now understand. Not that it's acceptable, but they're afraid of falls. And they'll argue that if Nana's pushing that patient and an accident occurs, are they covered by the same protocols and liability? But that's you almost should automatically, you've had a major surgery on Mama, the wheelchair should be there. The transport person should be there when you gauge when that's where the human part comes in, right?
Exactly. Right.
Ah,
Right. And with that same lack of humanity, that same neutral empathy, where you're like, well, I'm trying to keep you safe. So you stay
mm,
in your room, which is somewhat empathetic, but it's neutral because the real empathy would be, how do I creatively, compassionately figure out a way to uphold this policy, but also honor the fact that this is a birth has occurred, a child and parent have been separated, and there's an adult in the room, like a nana, who that is a person who can be the alert, physically responsible, right? But this just immediate reaction to just, in my opinion, always hurt or harm us or to lack the motivation to end our suffering. And in this sense, the suffering of parent-child separation after major abdominal surgery, why would we not facilitate reunification? Because I
right.
think another racialized group, we would.
Hmm. And maybe that's what I'm thinking. I've seen mamas wheeled into the NICU. Maybe I should have looked to see what their skin tone was.
Right, and we're
Something
not
else.
saying that every this is happening in every NICU. I just want people to know I am just saying that in certain places it seems preposterous, but again, 36 Black mothers were speaking about this,
Mhm.
their experiences. And this research was the focus groups and the community dialogue occurred in 2019. And we asked the Black mothers to speak of their experiences 2 years prior to that. But is what 2026, and we're still seeing and hearing similar stories around not honoring, our dignity, our humanity, as we either are coerced or forced, or we choose to birth in hospital settings, independent of the motivation or how we got there. People are still birthing in hospitals, and we need to do better by them. We cannot leave them behind.
Oh, I think this is an important part, point to time to point out that the baseline truth is that I mentioned that I love data. So we know that through peer-reviewed research,
Mhm.
right, Black mamas are treated different, period.
Yeah.
And it's not just about your stories. Your stories are what humanize the data, but it's documented reality. So I would not argue that down the hall, a pretty little girl was probably willed to the NICU. And then there's a reason that this beautiful woman was not, right? And so we know that the data shows it, regardless of income, education, access to
Yeah.
care.
Yes.
I won't go into great detail, but my daughter had a wonderful pregnancy experience. She was
Mhm.
cared for by her auntie, Cynthia Giampi Bannerman.
Mhm.
And Auntie Sin understood the assignment. She got my daughter pregnant. She had, she was seen, she was heard, she was cared for. The chief of peds was her goddad,
Mhm.
and yet Nana had to go in with the neck on a couple of folks because it didn't matter. It didn't matter that her husband was there. It didn't matter that he has this voice that projects across a courtroom because he's an attorney. It didn't matter, the size of her wedding ring. She was a little
Right.
black girl. And so I knew, and it was a hospital that I spent a lot of time in.
Mhm.
And I knew how I'd seen them treat other
Mhm.
patients, and I knew what were her rights. So regardless of having that village, it still became an issue. And when I went to the CNO to complain, and the CNO interviewed the IBCLC that I had issues with, she sat in the CNO's office, and without any logic, and I say no logic because you should have said, "How does the CNO know this even happened?" Right? She sat in the office and said she was a Black mama. She was overweight. She had twins. So why would I bother with trying to show her how to navigate breastfeeding? That is exactly what she said. That tells you how deeply she was racist. And of course, this
Yeah.
was a hospital that had been chasing baby friendly forever and blamed my team for the formula team for it. And I was like, no, it wasn't us. But I digress. Um,
No, but
we
can
have,
I add to that? It will tie into one of your questions, but what you're describing, I think, is also part of this neutral empathy, right? Like the person thinking that the staff thinking that the way she described, like, you're this and this and this, so why would I do this? Because it would be so much difficult. And to them, they think that they're being understanding of the context. And I just wanted to read this part that goes to like the reason why a lot of what the way people can be so callous in their judgment and their interpretation of what's happening is because of neutral apathy. And I just want to briefly read that part where neutral
Yes.
neutral empathy values and prioritizes intellectual and institutional knowledge over patient, experiential, emotional, cultural, and spiritual knowledge, reinforcing both testimonial and hermeneutical injustice. The accurate and precise practice of neutral empathy in the provision of obstetric care always requires shutting off one's own humanity to be able to actively participate in the violation of Black women's humanity and the perpetuation of Black women's suffering. Ideologies of anti-Black racism and misogynoir dating back to antebellum theories and writings from Southern physicians, physician scientists, and scientists established that Black people were deserving of chattel slavery given their subhuman and non-human characteristics, as discussed in Chapter 1. The denial of Black people's innate worth as human beings or their dignity is both justified and reinforced by anti-Black racist and anti-Black misogynistic ideologies. The operationalization of 19th century antebellum ideologies about Black men, women, and children and 20th century definitions of neutral empathy mandates the denial of Black dignity and humanity. Therefore, the system of obstetric care is designed not to facilitate sacred, with the C and the K, emancipatory and liberating births. Instead, the institutionalization, professionalization, and financialization of obstetric care are to maintain hierarchies of human value, knowing and knowledge that favor white femininity and white motherhood when white women serve as the default woman, and the lack of accountability and justice in addressing obstetric quality and patient safety violations persists given the absence of measurement selection and monitoring strategies that capture empathy, dignity, humanity, and racism prior to the development and validation of the first and only patient report experience measure of obstetric racism, also known as the Primo-B scale. And that's fundamentally why I believe people get to behave in this way, is because we're not looking at how embedded the medicalization, right, of physicians, specifically OBGYNs, is around this neutral empathy, where they think, right, it's this been that like the people thought that us, that plantation owners and slave owners enforcing us in the horrors of slavery was a benevolent practice because we were seen as subhuman or non-human. And I think it goes back to that comment by that nurse that, oh, because she was obese and had twins and blah, blah. I didn't think that she would want to or even could. That's not benevolence. That's not being caring. That's denying us of our humanity and dignity. And it is grounded in anti-Black racism and misogynoir.
Very much so. And officially, and for the record, my daughter breastfed for 2.5 years exclusively,
Right.
despite mama working for a formula company. Um, oh yes, Valerie, I'll find the Lyle Station story. Someone had asked about the study that I mentioned.
Oh, mhm.
Okay. Questions from the audience. I don't want to just hog. I have a lot. I will say that I brought up the story of my daughter because Dr. Scott, your story of the mother's breastfeeding plan being completely ignored
Oh,
resonated so
yeah.
much with us. And it does, to your point, or to steal your words, rather, it's the denial of dignity, right? And
Yes.
I don't know if you want to read that excerpt where the young woman says, right, that she um I've got it pulled here. The story, the
You
dismissal of
have
the
it.
mother
You can, do you
breastfeeding
want to read
plan.
it? I would love. Do you want to read it? Yes, please, please.
Oh, where is it? Oh, I said I had it on here. I've got it. I've got it. I told them I am breastfeeding. I had it in my plan. I said it when I walked in. I said it to every nurse, but I walked into that nursery and saw a bottle in his mouth. When I
Mhm.
asked why, the nurse didn't even look up from her chart. She just said he seemed hungry. They didn't see my milk as enough, and they didn't see my no as a command. It was a complete denial of my dignity as a mother. I wasn't a person to them. I was just a patient who was in the way of their routine.
Ooh, I just want to say thank you to those 36 Black mothers from
Mm.
Oakland and Los Angeles. I mean, even now, like it was a baptism in well, the first word that comes up, a baptism in truth, but Black women's truth. And Black women's truth as told for, by, and with them with each other. And I learned so much, but it also over time, even in writing the book and rereading the book and being part of conversations, that's why I can no longer practice as an obstetrician and gynecologist because it directly violates with my ethics. And I know that was one of the questions that you asked. I used to say recovering. Now I'm just going to say fully retired. And I also adapted another word from Dr. Alicia Bonaparte and Dr. Chinyere Opara from Black Women Birthing Justice book is being a dissident. I think it's in the first chapter, the foreword, they talk about that there are OBGYNs who align with reproductive justice, Black women birthing justice, but they are dissident ones. And I definitely am a dissident OBGYN. And I just want to because I thought the question was so great and I wanted to be able to publicly state this. And I'm reading from this. I can better articulate why I no longer can practice as an OBGYN. And I know people just celebrated medical students in their fourth year, just celebrated matching. And I saw a lot of Black women on social media celebrating matching into Dr. Farrington, our field. And I am concerned. I am deeply concerned that they're not being prepared for the potential moral injury that can occur when what they want to do in caring for our communities will not be accepted, acknowledged, amplified by the system or their mentees. And so I think about this Japanese concept of a reason for your being. And so it takes up the intersection of what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at is your reason for being, right? So it's kind of like what you're good at, what you love is your passion, what you love and what the world needs is your mission, what the world needs and what you can be paid for is your vocation, and what you can be paid for, what you're good at is your profession. And at the core of all of that is your reason for being. And I found that while I was comfortable as an OBGYN financially, I had feelings of emptiness. I had feelings of betrayal towards my community. The more I stood up for my community, the more I stood up for nurses and midwives and clerks and staff, the more I experienced like retaliation in various forms across decades. So I can no longer I had to change what was comfortable to me so that I can align more with my values, my ethics, my original authentic identity. So your question was like, how is it a adjusting of my identity? And I thank you for that question because I realized, no, it's a realignment of my profession with my identity. I am moving into a profession and a vocation where I can be rewarded to be in a part of a different profession that I want to be proud of being a part of. And for me, I was using I statements. I was no longer proud to be a Black woman OBGYN
Mm.
because of the denial of my own humanity in order to maintain certain proximities to power. And that power could be money, that power could be social, cultural acceptance, right? Being liked or wanted by other OBGYNs. When I finally realized that was no longer going to be part of my reality, especially with this book, I just was like, it's okay. I will start over at 50. But I'm more concerned with my own spirituality and my own humanity and my emotional, mental, spiritual health and wanting to be, um, and also my relationship, the integrity of my relationship with community.
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, you make me remember for many years, I worked in medical sales. And one of the things that, particularly during my stint in Chicago, I would hold dinners for the young Black doctors. And my godfather was a master chef, so they knew that if they came, they were not eating my cooking. But for many of them, they appreciated this set aside, and they because they weren't necessarily in the same, they weren't all at the same hospital, but the word got out that one, you had this Johnson and Wells prof that was cooking for you. But the other piece was that the injury for them was so deep, right? That they were taught to follow scripts that would conflict with their intuition or their own history, their own lived experience, and they'd find themselves in spaces where safety was used as a justification of denial of empathy, to use your words, and it can create an internal fracture.
Yeah.
What gives me hope, however, is many of those young folk have gone on to become some amazing practitioners,
Mhm.
and I see how they're navigating the path, and they've resisted that dominant narrative. They
Mhm.
walk into those hospitals with their eyes wide open because I think I'm considerably older than you, but thinking about my friends who were going through med school when I should have been but couldn't tolerate blood, um, they've not allowed it to strip the soul or
Mhm.
the culture. Does it mean that they necessarily make it to medical director or the C-suites or
Right.
the that's the challenge that we have to see. But what I do see that they do is that they are the ones who are bridging the gap. They're the ones who, one of my godchildren, who's a phenomenal cardiologist now, was very intentional of where she was going to practice. And she looked at the culture. She didn't look solely at, are you number one, number two, number three? And she went where it was, the culture would allow her to be the human that she is. It ended up impacting a lot of around her life and life choices, but she's where she's allowed to be human.
Yeah.
So I think that's such a sacred part. Let me look at the chat and see if there are any questions before I make my other commentary. Um, will you
I want to
restate?
add to what
Oh,
you're sharing. No, I just want to add that, like, I think I believe it is possible. It is possible. I do think people have to have like their forms of kinship. People have to have a safety net,
mhm,
and I will say I did not have that. The more I spoke out about these really obstetric racism and reproductive injustice in the institutions and spaces where it was more performative. Like people write, especially in the 2020, it was performative for them to attract brilliant Black minds and put our faces on websites, but actually, behind the veil, there were many violations occurring. And I have just seen, witnessed too many people who even look like me, kiss the ring. And also
mhm,
they can so that they can continue to experience acceleration and promotion. And so I am what's the word I'm trying to say? I am relieved when people can find other ethically aligned and morally aligned physicians who are not just who are not just employees, but who are in leadership, right? Leadership and in the C-suite who can protect those who are speaking, truth to
mhm,
power. Because when one does start on that pathway, um, there are folks who don't want to see your power, your brilliance. And so I am grateful that people are finding systems and communities of care while they continue to be in that space.
mhm. See, this is what doesn't show up in your professional bio.
I know.
The sheer weight of being the person to speak out.
Mhm.
Um, and as someone who's often been the fly on the wall, I know it's hard for families to raise their voices. But more importantly, I know for a clinician to stand up and say, this is the system I was trained in, it's failing the people I love and respect, to point out the denial of empathy,
Mhm.
the abuse of kinship while you're still
Mhm.
standing inside the walls.
Mhm.
That takes a specific kind of courage. It does. And
Mhm.
remind the next moderator when they introduce you, if you don't say it, for them to say it for you, because I think that's the thing that I'm getting like goosebumps, and I'm a teary person. I'm going to cry, but I know it was not an it could not have been an easy decision for you. I tell people that my roommate in undergrad was a med student. She's now a physician or a pre-med. And when I was out going,
Mhm.
she was studying, and when I married and had my child, she was studying, and it takes a lot to commit to this profession. So, one of the questions in the and as Rose so beautifully puts it, it takes a lot of courage, and unfortunately puts a target on your back. And you are so right, Rose. And you're another person that my voice gets wobbly when I talk about, because
Mhm.
she's done the same thing and done it beautifully and well dressed and well made
Mhm.
up. And I need that little jacket while we're on that subject. Um, but one of the questions that we don't want to walk away from, Dr. Scott, is would you restate the 4 to 5 cores of one's being?
Oh, yeah, I thank you. I put it in the chat. So
Oh,
it's
you
a
did. Oh, okay.
philosophy of Ikigai. I'm hoping I'm saying it correctly. A Japanese concept meaning a reason for being. And so there's a link that I put in the chat for everyone that at the core, right, is the intersection of it's passion, mission, profession, vocation. And that kind of the outer circles are what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And
Mm,
then what you're good at and what you love is your passion, right? At the intersection of what you love and what the world needs is your mission. At the intersection of what the world needs and what you can be paid for is your vocation. And the intersection of what you're good at and what you can be paid for is your profession. And at all these intersections, at the core is the ikigai. And so it shows that how, perhaps, between your passion and your profession, there is satisfaction, but a feeling of uselessness. That's how I felt, right? At the intersection of your passion and mission, right? You could experience delight and fulfillingness, but no wealth. Between your mission and vocation, you can experience excitement and complacency, but a sense of uncertainty. And between your profession and vocation, you can experience comfort, but a feeling of emptiness. And so I know for me, my intern year in 2022, I chose to go to a community program on purpose because the academic programs, number one, it's a lot of things. We're like, you need to change your hair. My hair was natural. So that's one thing. And then there was a hierarchy or segregation of care based upon Medicaid and commercial insurance, private, public and private insurance. And the attending physicians got to see those who had commercial insurance, the residents saw those with public insurance. And even when we rounded, we segregated rounds based upon who got to see the commercial patients with commercial insurance versus public insurance. And as a child who grew up getting like eating lunch and breakfast free because of our economics and where we lived, I just ethically couldn't go to a place that was going to treat me differently because I would have been on public insurance. And that is part of why I think it's important that, for some people they can continue to go on. I just know for me, it was moral injury since my intern year. And though it wasn't because of the community-based program, it was just this is not what I thought. This is not how I wanted to transform healthcare delivery models. And so there's just been a misalignment. And I just feel grateful that I have more alignment between what I do and who I am and my values
mm,
now, but it did require making a big shift in my profession.
mm. That's, and I know you're not, can I say an amen? Because as you were describing it, it's like, she's right. I think about some of the big health systems that were our key clients, and I knew where I would find the Black residents that I wanted to invite to dinner. It
Mm,
wasn't the mothership.
mm,
It wasn't. It was in the community-based hospitals.
mhm,
Question: do you believe that the growing movement of birth justice activism, including community members who demand dignified care, i.e., Sister Song, National Perinatal Task Force, the Earth app, and others, including my own, can move or
mhm.
force a shift in obstetric culture?
I know it's 10 o'clock. I would say yes. And I'm gonna say yes, I believe we can. And I think we need to really consider the the delay or um the delay or the kind of like, what am I trying to say? The delay and the kind of soft approach. I can't think of the word right now, but we are not speaking to the professionalization of obstetricians and gynecologists. Every intervention that I see is either about making the Black woman or person, or even if you remove race, like smaller and younger, smaller in size, younger in age, and healthier without any medical comorbidities to justify a physiological birth when that is not the route to physiological birth. It's going to be physiological because we're human beings and we birth through our vagina or through our, or through our abdomen. Like the conflation between what's considered normal and not normal or pathology. And I don't see, and I see the inclusion of midwives, the use of telehealth, the use of apps, the use of doulas, and not when intervention is about changing the fundamental truths, the trainings, the language and behavior of OBGYN physicians. I feel we are being delicate, even in the organizations that you named. What is this fear of naming the profession and the individuals in proximity to that profession fundamentally responsible? 84% of deaths are preventable.
Mm.
98% of births occur in the hospital. Over 80%, 88% of births are attended by a physician. So I see very few interventions around modifying physician behavior and holding the physician accountable for their leadership, for their language, for their knowledge, for what they document in the chart, right? Like there's a felon's record that follows the felon everywhere and dictates how society, right, engages and views them, if they're worthy of employment to care for themselves. The patient record, the electronic medical record is the same way physicians are allowed to, and nurses who get to chart, they're creating these stories of who we are as people so that people engage the health record and not us as human beings. And so I just wish that we would have more investments in implementation science, right? What are the practices
Mm.
that are aligned with how communities define what it means to feel safe, right? What are the ways in which we are curating community defined notions of quality, safety, and equity, and then measuring what community defines, right, as those metrics. That's what I would like to see more from our community is um, being more disruptive in the ways that we engage with physicians and physician-led initiatives because physician-centered models are not the answer, but we have to still address that they are in the center. You know what I mean? Like they're still present,
Mhm.
they're still being trained. How do we, like, what would a training program look like for OBGYNs who want to practice in midwifery first, midwifery-led models of care? Like that would be an incredible fellowship, right? To be trained to be midwifery centered as an OBGYN, similar to
Mhm.
how my residency training was. Like that's what I'm hoping would look for. Because we still need to OBGYN physicians are still needed because we are interventionalists. Like there are some people who are going to need what we can offer as an intervention, but how do we think about socializing, professionalizing us to be more midwifery centered in our thinking and our models of care?
So much you've said. One, and from 40 years, y'all, 37 in working with physicians. When we obviously pharma, we spend a lot of time on the research, and it's acknowledged that shifting physician behavior is one of the most complex challenges for us and in healthcare because and I hope I quote it properly. It moves beyond because moving beyond simple education into
Mhm,
the territory of psychological change.
mhm.
And yes, we would talk about implementation science and that it shows that passive interventions like handing someone a book or inviting them to a dinner almost never work. That
No.
to modify behavior, particularly in high stake environments like hospitals, you have
Yeah.
to move from that passive dissemination to
Yes.
active intervention. And
Yes.
so that's where, back in the day, we'd take them to Hawaii and all that because we needed to move you. My simple thing was from apathy to advocacy.
Yeah.
And I'm I'm amening you because how do we move them? In my case, it was moving them to where they were using my human milk fortifier, right? But
Yeah.
in this case, where we're moving them to human-centered care,
Yes, yes.
right? And so we can't take them to Hawaii, but how do we get them to see that there are ways in which they can retain um, the need for safety or the need for outcomes,
Mhm.
the need to make money because I dropped in the chat when Dr. Les, you were talking about the NICU and Dr. Les said the NICU is a profit margin or a profit maker, if that's the right word, for the hospital, as opposed to OB care is often a loss leader.
Mhm.
So how do we move that, right? And so so much. I know we're running over. I wish we should have booked 2 hours. We have to. I will always invite you back, Dr. Karen, anytime. And thank you for showing us the way. Thank you for hearing the calling. I'm going to put on my father's since passed away, but he was a Kojic bishop. Don't look at the red lips. I've stepped away from some of it. But Daddy always
We're
said that
Pentecostal,
your
so I understand.
oh, see, but you listen to your calling, and that the Holy Spirit told you this is what, and it's I can see it in every page. If you all have not
Oh,
bought Dr. Scott's book, it's not a love story like Mother Country that we talked about earlier on Monday that I was obsessed with as well. But this book for anyone who is a nana to if you are doing work in the space, you absolutely must read this book. And even when you think that you are doing the work and doing it well, she challenges you. I think we need to take you to the SNMA next time they have a session and talk to our emerging leaders because um, it challenges us to even think about what we do know. No, and for many of you, you know that I do Birthing the Magic. I volunteer. My business partner and I founded the organization with volunteers. We do this because we feel so strongly. After my daughter's birth, Dr. Valencia Walker was like, "Well, how do you pay it forward?" And since I couldn't give everybody my Rolodex for them to find these amazing doctors and practitioners who got my daughter through her pregnancy journey, we do the next best thing with having you come here and share your knowledge. Um, but even in reading her book, I was humbled because I realized there's so much more we can do.
mm.
Even just little things like how we say stuff. You made me
Yes.
rethink it. You made me rethink. I got to tell you one day about how I was like, oh my God, I should have thought about this when we did a workshop on HIV. And
Mhm.
it was like, oh man, Dr. Karen, I should have gone back to your book because it was a beautiful no indictment of the young woman that did a fantastic job of talking about it. It was my failure in how we marketed it.
Okay.
And when I was reading through your book and prepping for today, I thought I need to get Afton to come back so I can market this right the next time. And he
Well,
do the human part, but
I appreciate you saying this because I do, even though the book is based on, it's a Black feminist hermeneutic phenomenology of childbirth hospitalization from the lived experiences, expressions, and expectations of 36 Black mothers in Los Angeles and Oakland. It's like sacred birth is an exemplar. One can apply the sacred quality framework to any related health phenomenon.
yeah,
And so I'm glad that you brought up the work around HIV because the sacred, right, is an acronym for these Black women identified quality domains. Like we deserve sacred birth, sacred HIV prevention care, sacred HIV care, sacred diabetes care. Like you really can take this and apply it to any clinical specialty, any clinical care, because of course, what we're seeing in birth and in pregnancy and postpartum is being magnified right now. But it's also happening in other aspects of our life outside of pregnancy and postpartum. So I do hope that will be one takeaway is for
yeah.
people to see this as an exemplar and how could sacred, right, show up in any parts of our clinical experience as it relates to like our bodies, our bodily autonomy, our decisional autonomy, not just for birth, but for any time we're engaged in the healthcare system.
Amen. And you're so right because we had Dr. Cassandra Henderson did a conversation on gestational diabetes. And
Yes.
I've been working on a project and I kept saying compliance
Mhm.
as we were prepping. And she said, no, Marie, we no longer say compliance. And in my mind, I was like, oh, she's read Dr. Karen's book, or at least they are implementing
Right.
because, and then she talked about not the guilt
Yeah.
well, you failed your glucose test.
Yes,
And
right.
it's so
Well,
much, yeah,
right.
that
In
you, yeah,
labor,
it's,
when the cervix doesn't dilate according to these timelines we have. We used to call it failure to progress, right? When the cervix, after someone is pregnant over so many weeks, by 12, 13, 14, 16 weeks, we used to call it cervical incompetency. Like, just that's what I mean by the pathologization of our bodies, our reproducing bodies. Like, it just going back to what you were saying earlier, like it will require a fundamental dismantling of how we think and talk and speak and approach humans, human bodies, Black reproductive bodies in medical care. But the time is now. Like we need to do that. Otherwise, we're gonna, I think, see more moral injury as people encounter, right, these systemic ways of language and of behavior and the documentation. Like it's all that's all part of the culture. So yeah.
so true, so true. Well, I know we have to let people go back to
I know
lunch or
to
go
live,
back to
yes.
work, but Dr. Scott, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for giving us this beautiful body of work. Thank you guys for joining us. We will
Well,
share the
thank you,
recording
everybody.
later today or tomorrow. And if there's any, we'll include the link to buy Dr. Scott's book. Please support her in buying the book. No, it's not a $20
I know.
Amazon, but it is worth it. I have gone back to it so many times in so many ways, and particularly when I realized I literally bought a copy for the young woman that volunteers and helps us with our marketing because I said, let's read this as a book club because it helped
Oh,
me see we never should have said we have a workshop on HIV. Mm-mm. I should
mm,
have said we have a workshop on reproductive health. We have a workshop on claiming your body. We have a,
yeah.
and folks
You
used to pay me to do this,
Nicole.
Dr. Scott, and it never occurred to me. But you gave me the bulb. So for anyone that's doing work around women's health, or and even if it's not Black women, you should
Right.
read this book because it
Yeah.
helps you see it in a whole other way. You could take a medical communications course, or you can read Dr. Scott's book.
Oh, Marie, thank
Which
you.
is cheaper, which is cheaper, more affordable. I shouldn't say cheaper, but thank you. I appreciate you. And everybody, we'll see you at oh gosh, what's our next workshop? We've got Dr. Alicia Bonaparte, which is a perfect part two to
It
this
is. It
conversation. She's
is.
at 3 Eastern. And then at, is she our first event today? Let me quickly show. And you can find all of it at our saferbirthsnow.com. Um, no, the next workshop is at 4:30 Eastern. No, the Birthing Justice with Dr.
Mhm.
Alicia is at 3 Eastern. Come back and join us. It's exciting to me that she is your one of your inspirations.
Yes,
And one of the
yes,
other thing, yeah, one of the other things we're going to talk about is knowing your roots, knowing your health record,
yeah,
because it's so important. And I know Mama and them, we often didn't talk about
yeah.
things, myself included. My daughter didn't know that she should have had siblings, and she didn't for very heartbreaking reasons, until she was talking about her fertility issues. And so
Yes.
that way she was able to go in very well informed and
Right.
prepared. So do join us. And if you are a doula and you want to receive an attendance certificate, email hello@birthingmagic.org. Thanks to Nakia Lawson and her wonderful team in providing that certification for us. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marie. Take
Thank you,
care.
Dr. K. Take care.